Welcome back to this week's episode of Hormones, Metabolism, and You. I'm your host, Dr. Cassie Smith. I am a board-certified endocrinologist who practices functional medicine now. My goal with this podcast is to help educate people about all conditions that affect their hormones. Today, we're going to talk about PCOS. It is one of the most common endocrine disorders in women. 1 in 10 women in the United States struggle with this, but it's estimated that it could be 1 in 5. It's just many women have been undiagnosed or don't know that they have PCOS. I've done several episodes on PCOS, and when I do them, you guys have tons of additional questions. You reach out to me, you comment. And so because of that, I've looked for other people that I can interview about PCOS. There is a wonderful podcast called A Cyster and Her Mister, done by somebody named Tallene and her husband Sirak. They are a couple, and she is a registered dietitian, and he is actually a personal trainer. And so they have this podcast about PCOS that tons of people follow and listen to. I think they do a wonderful job trying to educate people around all things PCOS. So I've asked them to come on today so that I can ask them a ton of questions that you guys have. Tallene is a registered dietitian who specializes in PCOS and weight loss. She was actually diagnosed with PCOS when she was 18, which she tells me a little bit about in this interview. But after much research and experience, she reversed her symptoms and now helps other women do the same. Her and her husband, Sirak, who is a PCOS personal trainer, focuses on helping women with PCOS learn how to thrive symptom-free. They've developed an app called the Cysterhood, which is spelled Cyster, like a cyst, which hosts the largest community of PCOS women learning how to lose weight and manage PCOS. Like I said, they also have this amazing podcast called A Cyster and Her Mister. And so we talked today in depth about all things PCOS. I started out by asking them to just discuss what is PCOS and how is it diagnosed. Then we moved into talking about why is it misdiagnosed and misunderstood. They explained to us the 4 types of PCOS so that you understand, are you somebody that has inflammatory issues, insulin issues, adrenal issues, thyroid issues, or a combination or all of these symptoms? We talked about root causes of PCOS and what women can do to reverse this. How does PCOS trigger symptoms like uncontrolled weight gain? How does gluten and dairy relate to PCOS and metabolism? So should we be eating gluten and dairy when we have PCOS? How do things like leptin, cortisol, and insulin change with PCOS and our metabolism? We then moved into women with PCOS are often told maybe to cut carbs. So is keto a good idea with PCOS or not? Since Sirak has a personal training degree and Tallene has a registered dietitian degree, we talked a lot about this. They have some good information because I know there's people out there that have varying opinions about this. And in talking about that, we talked about intermittent fasting. Does intermittent fasting help PCOS or not? We talked about, should you have a big breakfast, a small dinner? What do we do with meals? From that, we kind of transitioned into workout styles. And so what workout style, what type of workout should you be doing with PCOS to manage your PCOS symptoms better? After that, we kind of walked through an ideal day of PCOS management. So what does it look like? What do they do in their life? What should we be doing? What are 10 healthy habits that we can do with PCOS to help manage PCOS? And so we talked through all those things. And at the very end, Tallene gave us her experience with PCOS and how she kind of reversed her process. And again, she shared with us a typical day that they have pieced together with all of their information. So this podcast is full of great things if you have PCOS. So many great tips, all kind of condensed into one thing. Some of the top 10 questions that people ask with PCOS. So I think this is a great podcast. If you have PCOS, you'll definitely want to listen until the very end. And then make sure, please, that you are sharing this with other people that could benefit from it. So here we go. Today, you guys are in for such a treat. I have been super excited to have my next couple guests on the podcast. They are just amazing with PCOS, which is something that so many people struggle with. So I know a lot of you guys reach out to me on social media and on the podcast and you want more information about PCOS. So since you've asked, I went and found some of the best people, I think, that are giving very good information in the world of PCOS. So I have Tallene and Sirak which is her husband. They actually have a podcast called The Sisterhood, which a lot of my patients know about, and I've had you guys start listening to it. But they do a wonderful job talking about PCOS. So we're going to talk all things PCOS today. And so thank you guys for joining me on our podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so excited.
So I know we kind of talked about this before. There's a bunch of stuff I want to cover since I have you guys, and you're amazing. And we're going to link all of their stuff in the show notes. But if you guys haven't checked out their podcast, I want you to do it. I'm going to kind of get to like pull 10 questions from some of their best episodes, I think, but you can always go back and, listen to longer form content of this on their episodes. So we're going to start just generally for people. Tell people, what is PCOS and how is it diagnosed?
So PCOS is one of the most common endocrine disorders, and it happens to about 1 in 10, and in some countries 1 in 5 women. So that's a lot. It's very prevalent and often goes misdiagnosed, not diagnosed. It's very underdiagnosed. So many women are just silently suffering from symptoms of infertility, symptoms of like hair loss, fatigue, facial hair, cystic acne, and really rapid weight gain that's really unexplainable. And, it's hard to pinpoint that it's PCOS unless you go to a doctor who is experienced with diagnosing it.
I would agree with that. And so why do you think it's so misdiagnosed or misunderstood so often by patients and physicians?
I think in many cases, because the name, like the first thing is the name, what it stands for, PCOS, is polycystic ovarian syndrome. So in many cases, it suggests that you have to have ovarian cysts to be diagnosed with PCOS. But in reality, according to the Rotterdam criteria, you need 2 of the following 3 symptoms, which are hyperandrogenism, which is elevated male hormones like testosterone. Second is ovarian cysts. And third is irregular periods. Now, as I said earlier, you need 2 of the following 3. So it kind of creates like this generic like checkpoints or bullet points to fill out. Because for many women, we know when they're teenagers, like having elevated certain hormones may be normal during those periods of time, or having certain hormonal imbalances could be normal that could lead to irregular periods or could lead to missed periods. And then it's thought as normal, but there could be an underlying issue like PCOS that can go undiagnosed.
Yeah, and I think a couple of other things too. We used to think of PCOS as you had to be obese or you had to be overweight. And now we know that that's definitely not the case. And I'm going to let you guys talk about that, I think, a little bit. But you don't have to be overweight to have PCOS. So I feel like that gets missed a lot in people that I see that have had PCOS for years. It's somebody who's not necessarily obese. The other thing I think people forget is if you take birth control, your periods are going to be regular because you're forcing regularity of your periods. And so I have a lot of people say, well, I don't have irregular cycles. I take my birth control and then I stop taking it at the end of the month and I bleed every month. Well, what were you doing before you took birth control, right? How are your menstrual cycles before? And so I think that's 2 things. Sometimes even doctors mess that up, right? Like they're like, oh, well, this person isn't anovulatory or they're not having, irregular menstrual cycles because they're taking birth control. So, but I do like that you pointed out the Rotterdam criteria. And so that is the diagnostic criteria for PCOS. It's just, you have to understand those other things as well, right? Yeah. So you guys did a great podcast on the 4 types of PCOS, which I thought was very helpful for people. Can you kind of briefly explain that so people understand, because if you Google or chat GPT PCOS, it gives you that generic, what we were talking about, overweight, but that's not all people with PCOS.
Totally. Well, PCOS has several root causes that drive symptoms. So it helps if you understand what the root cause is. So there are 4 main root causes. You can have multiple, you can have all of them, you can have one. But if one stands out to you, then that's the one you really want to focus on and then move on to focusing on the rest, or else it's very overwhelming. So the first one is chronic inflammation, where all women with PCOS tend to have this. It's an inflammatory condition. And you'll have symptoms of chronic inflammation like feeling bloated all the time, the scale just won't budge, your cell metabolism isn't working properly, and you can have symptoms like skin rashes, cystic acne, and chronic fatigue.
Ovarian cysts too, right?
Ovarian cysts as well. And then the chronic inflammation can lead to having the second PCOS root cause, which is insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is so prevalent. 80% of women with PCOS have it. So many women with PCOS have it, and oftentimes we're not even told what it is. And signs of insulin resistance are having really bad sugar cravings. And, you think it's your willpower, but it's really just you have this metabolic disorder that's making you crave sugar all the time and causing you to hold on to fat more. And then the third PCOS type is adrenal fatigue. And around 30% of women with PCOS have this. This is where you feel chronically fatigued. You slept 8 hours, but then you wake up exhausted, or you can't sleep at night and you're tired all day. Perhaps you're addicted to the adrenaline rush of really intense workouts and you're always on like level 10. These are signs of adrenal fatigue. Your body's producing a lot of adrenaline and cortisol and not enough progesterone and other hormones necessary for ovulation. And that can stunt ovulation and lead to PCOS symptoms. And then the fourth type is hypothyroidism. And this is a really big sign of hypothyroidism is losing hair all over your head and having chronic fatigue and gaining weight rapidly. No matter what diet you change, what you do, like your thyroid is off and not working. And a lot of hypothyroid symptoms are similar to PCOS symptoms. And so sometimes doctors get confused on like what to diagnose you with, but it kind of goes hand in hand for some people.
I couldn't agree more. So inflammation, I think, is like the root cause of all illnesses. And when you have really high inflammation, a lot of times you end up with high insulin. And so then those high insulin levels drive a lot of issues, cortisol issues, which then affect your adrenal gland, thyroid issues, and then sex hormone issues as well, like your estrogen, your progesterone, your testosterone. So I think in general in disease, that's, even in men, like I see this in men, and then it changes their testosterone. And so I think that is very important for people to understand. And so when you talk about root causes of PCOS and what women can do to reverse them, that kind of goes back to those 4 types. Is that correct?
Right. You want to nail those, like, and understand which one of those 4 categories you fall into mainly, and then take it from there. So, for example, if you're really insulin resistant, you have really bad cravings, you have labs that show your blood sugar's out of control, this is a great place to start. Now you can focus on eating a higher protein breakfast, or you can focus on lifting weights to improve your body's insulin sensitivity. Or you can, start going on walks after your meal to help balance your blood sugar. And these little tweaks are going to make a really big difference in your cravings, in your metabolism, in your weight loss, because you're targeting the root cause instead of just eating 1,000 calories and working out really hard, which is like a really blanket way to to just lose weight, according to Google.
Right. And so is it possible that somebody has more than one of these root causes?
Absolutely. You can have more than one, you can have all of them. A lot of times when you have a lot of chronic inflammation, like I did, where I was really sensitive to gluten and dairy, and it was creating a lot of cystic acne and fatigue, and I was hungry all the time, no matter how much I ate. That chronic inflammation led my cells to become insulin resistant. And so I had both of them together, and the cravings were out of control.
So I do think it's important, when you have PCOS, that you see someone that understands how to not only do all these labs, but then interpret them for you, right? Because I tell people this all the time, like thyroid labs can be interpreted different ways. Same thing with insulin levels. A lot of people will say, oh, your fasting insulin is 17, you're fine. You're not fine if your fasting insulin level is 17. Although the reference range says you're fine, you are not fine, I promise, with an insulin level of 17. So I think that is, and then your adrenal, like I think that's something that so many people forget about. My poor Hashimoto's patients and my PCOS patients, I would say 30% is a low number in what I see. Almost 70, 80% of my patients have adrenal issues. And so it's like, we have to go back and address that. And then a lot of that also, when you're chronically stressed and you have all this insulin and you're inflamed, it affects your gut tremendously. And, I know you guys talk about leaky gut and you are believers in all of this. I see it because I do stool studies. I see some of the craziest gut studies you have ever seen in people that have PCOS or hypothyroidism that are just chronically stressed out. And they're like, well, I mean, I eat well, and they do. They eat well and they exercise well, but their gut is just a wreck because of the stress and their adrenal gland, right? And so I think that's something in today's society that a lot of people just miss, and it's so disheartening because there's not a lot of education around it, right? And these are the people who we're going to kind of talk about this when we keep going with the exercise part. But these are the people who try to out exercise things and try to out, starve themselves, more exercise, less food. And that just makes it all worse. It makes your adrenal completely worse and your gut worse.
It's really interesting that when you're diagnosed, they literally tell you eat less, move more. And women with PCOS are so desperate to lose weight, of course, because they're struggling with this. So they listen to that piece of advice, and then it leads to eating disorders. It leads to a really unhealthy relationship with exercise and food, and years of yo-yo dieting and like desperately trying to lose weight in this crazy way that their doctor once suggested when they were at a vulnerable age of 16, being diagnosed with PCOS and handed birth control with no explanation.
So true. But even women in their 20s and 30s, I got diagnosed with PCOS in my 30s, and they said the same thing, like, oh, just exercise more and eat less. And at that time I was going to Orange Theory like 7 days a week. I'm not sure you can exercise more than that. And I was eating like 1,500 calories a day. It was like, oh, it was terrible. I had no hormones. Like I was, and I was already like 120 pounds. So it's like, that's not going to work, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like your body was probably stressed out. It's like working out as if there's like a war happening, and it's not eating because so it's thinking there's a famine, so it's just like shutting down
So I
everything.
finally got smart, listened to people like you, did my own research. I'm like, screw this. I'm eating like 3,000 calories a day, sleeping more, and doing some yoga. And lo and behold, like it was way better. So
Oh yeah, I mean, I was gonna say the gut health thing is so huge too because, like you said, we see so many people who are doing things like perfectly. They're eating as best as they can, they're exercising, but then something like stress, for example, is affecting their gut health. And they wake up and maybe they don't have an appetite, or maybe they have an appetite later in the day, and it's causing them to kind of, it affects even their diet to a certain extent.
well, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there because I was gonna talk to you about triggers, food triggers, but talk to me about why PCOS triggers symptoms. Like, what in PCOS causes people to have this uncontrollable weight gain?
So, wow, loaded question. Where do we begin? Well, it really boils down to insulin resistance. When you have insulin resistance, your cells aren't communicating with the hormone insulin. And insulin is trying to give your cells the glucose that's broken down from the food you're eating, and insulin takes it from your bloodstream and gives it to your cells so your cells can burn it for energy and metabolism can work, right? But if you have chronic inflammation, your cells are all locked up. If you have insulin resistance, your insulin can't communicate with your cells. And then what happens is that sugar stores as fat, especially around the midsection, turns into belly fat. And then we start gaining weight in the midsection. And sometimes women have lean PCOS. They don't gain weight in the midsection, but that doesn't mean that that fat isn't accumulating around your liver, leading to fatty liver, or around your internal organs. So you have this disruption in your like metabolism because of your hormones. So it's not really just a hormonal condition, it's a metabolic disorder. And because of that insulin resistance, not only are you gaining weight, but also insulin is triggering high testosterone in your ovaries. And then your ovaries are overproducing that testosterone. It's leading to infertility, and PCOS is the number one cause of infertility, and it's a treatable cause for infertility. So it's like you don't realize what you could do is reduce your testosterone levels, manage your insulin resistance, get down to the root of it, and heal that.
I agree. I think insulin is one of the biggest drivers of weight with PCOS. The cortisol, you have these certain people who are just, the cortisol people that are just, their cortisol is so high from chronic stress or their type A personality. And I think some of those people have issues as well. But I do think that it goes back to insulin. And then you just get on this cycle, like you said. And when your insulin's high, you're storing all your food as fat. When you're storing all your food as fat, you're always hungry. So you're eating more. And it's just this really nasty hamster wheel that you get in, and you can't get off of it very easily. So
Oh yes. It's a combination too, right? With like if you have inflammation, then your body's not retaining weight due to the water retention. There's also like thyroid. If you have hypothyroid, then your metabolism is just drastically lower. So you combine all these different factors, you're just now like gaining weight uncontrollably.
yeah, and then that doesn't help when you go to a physician or a provider and they say, "Oh, eat less and exercise more." It just kind of makes it worse, right? So explain to people, we're going to kind of transition to food for a second. So I get this question all the time. Do I have to stop eating gluten and dairy if I have PCOS or if I have thyroid issues or if I have whatever? This is how I feel in general. But talk about how gluten and dairy affect PCOS and insulin and just weight metabolism.
Sure. So I always say just try it for 30 days and see how you feel and see if it helps with some of your symptoms. And then if you want, you can continue. You don't have to be perfect at it, but at least you know what your triggers are. And that's, the best way to find out if you should be gluten and dairy free. Nobody can tell you that it's going to work. Every body is different, of course. But everyone who eats gluten will have an inflammatory reaction to it. And to what degree, it depends on the person. So what happens is your body releases this enzyme called zonulin, and when you eat gluten, and that causes the tight junctions of your gut to loosen up. And then the protein called gliadin from the gluten molecule enters into your bloodstream, creating chronic inflammation. And for some people, that's a lot. And for some people, it's not that bad. But if you have PCOS, an already inflammatory condition, then more inflammation could be making it worse. And then there's just so many other, like I could go on for this whole
And
rest of
gliadin
it.
was like the thyroid molecule as well.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, you go ahead.
Yeah, so gliadin is a molecule from gluten and it looks like the thyroid molecule. And so when you're sensitive to gluten and you eat that, your body attacks it, but then it also attacks your thyroid molecule because they look the same molecularly. And so every time you eat the gluten, it's going to affect your thyroid. And if you have hypothyroid, it's going to create more problems.
Yeah. And I like the way you explain that too. It's like when you eat gluten, it kind of makes sure your stomach cells separate and you get this every time you eat, like you just get this reaction where the food that you're eating is leaving your gut and it's going to your bloodstream. It just creates all this extra inflammation. And so,
yeah, and
go ahead.
Sorry, go
No,
ahead.
so
I was going to say, sorry, go ahead.
So it just, that chronic inflammation, like you said, although that food tastes so good, people say this all the time, like I eat this food and then I feel terrible. And I'm like, then why do you keep eating that food? And they're like, well, because they're addicted to it, right? Because sugar is so addictive. And so it's just interesting when a lot of people, I think, know the answer to the question, but they just keep eating the food.
Yeah, absolutely. And like as those like the junctions within the gut open up, there's food particles that get through, there's bacteria, foreign particles that should not be in the bloodstream, and the body attacks those molecules and creates that battleground for inflammation, right? And then there's that, and as well as like gluten these days are so different than how gluten was maybe like 100 years ago. I'm sure many of your listeners know, but the plant, like the wheat plant, has changed drastically from the last like 50 to 70 years, where they made it to a thicker stalk, so it's harder for our guts to digest. But not just that, but it's the glyphosate that's like drastically been added to the crops. Sorry, should I say crops? And even so, like in, I believe it was 2006 or 2005, where they now allow companies to apply glyphosate in the last stages of the wheat plant, whereas before it was in the very early stages, so that rain and over time it can get washed off. But now they literally apply glyphosate at the very end. So that glyphosate is a pesticide, by the way, and is a huge endocrine disruptor. So now that glyphosate is on the wheat plant at the very end. So that's being passed through in our foods.
No, I completely agree. And I ask people this all the time. This is what I ask people when they ask, should I eat gluten? I say, would you eat Roundup? And they're like, no. And I'm like, then I wouldn't eat gluten. Just very simple. Like that's pretty much what you're eating, at least in America. To be fair, the wheat is not treated the same in Europe and other countries. Australia, not treated the same. But in America, if you eat wheat, you might as well lick Roundup. Like that's just, I mean, factual. Like you might as well just eat Roundup. And so that's why I try to tell people like, oh, it may taste good, and the other thing is like, there's so many gluten-free options now and that taste good. So I don't feel sorry for people because I haven't eaten gluten for like 10 years. And when I first stopped eating gluten, it was terrible. Like everything tasted awful, but I mean, it's so much easier now. And the same with dairy, dairy is another really disruptive molecule in a lot of people, especially women. And a lot of this goes back to our cortisol and our insulin and our leptin levels. But dairy and casein, like the casein and A1 in dairy, a lot of it goes back to the fact that we treat cows and what cows eat differently now, right? And so they have a lot more growth hormone in them, but it affects a lot of people really negatively, and they just don't even realize it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, there are so many hormones in dairy that are meant to make a baby cow grow, like insulin, like growth factor. And for a woman with PCOS who's already insulin resistant, that's truly the last thing that we need. Not to mention the studies that show that it increases androgen levels. So that's really the last thing we need.
No, for sure. And there are so many good substitutes for dairy too, like not cheese, but there's coconut yogurt. There's lots of, there's almond milk. Now you have to be careful about that because there are certain almond milks that are better than others, and I, for my listeners, they know, like I have a lot of this on my website, but yes, dairy can be so inflammatory. And I don't know if you guys know this, but 53% of acne, especially in teenagers, can be cured by getting rid of dairy.
Mm-hmm. I totally believe it. There's so many research showing cystic acne and dairy like directly linked to each other that I totally
think that it should be malpractice in this country for a dermatologist to ever give a teenager Accutane before they make them go on a dairy-free diet for at least 30 days. Because over half the time you're going to cure their acne as opposed to giving them a medication that could potentially harm their liver forever. And I think as a parent, if you're listening to this, you should force your child to not eat dairy for 30 days before you allow them to do something like that, because that is part of your job as their parent, is to protect them and to make good decisions for them. That's just my opinion. I know that not all dermatologists agree with me, but I don't care because
I agree.
Yeah.
And I'm not a dermatologist. I remember going to the dermatologist when I had really bad cystic acne and being offered Accutane or spironolactone. And I also remember there was a poster in the doctor's office that said acne doesn't have anything to do with your diet. Like it was on a poster in the room. And I was like, whoa. And I was studying nutrition. I was like, there's a problem here.
Yeah.
There's like a systematic problem.
Yeah.
For sure. Huge problem. It has so much to do with your diet, and it has so much to do with your sleep and, your hormones, all sorts of stuff. So, okay. So then you guys are on the train of you should at least avoid I say gluten for everyone. And to your point, some people tolerate dairy better than others, but I still think if you have hormonal issues like PCOS, you shouldn't eat dairy. But to your point, I like that try it for 30 days. Try it for 30 days and see how you feel. Because I remember, to be fair, I was like the biggest cheese connoisseur in the world until 2022 when I got sick again with my Hashis. And I saw this functional medicine doctor and he's like, Cassie, you know that you need to not eat dairy. And I was like, well, you don't understand. Like cheese is a food group, like that's what I eat for dinner. I have like 10 different cheeses in my fridge. And he was like, why don't you just do it? Just do it for 1 week, And I was like, so I finally did it. I remember I came home, I told my husband, I was like, all right, I'm not eating cheese. And he's like, you just bought like $100 worth of cheese. I'm like, I know. I didn't do it for 1 week. And I swear, like my wedding ring just like was coming out. Like I felt so good after a week. I was like, okay, never again. I never picked it up again since 2022. And I don't.
Yeah, once you feel it, you just never want to pick it up again.
Ever. My husband's like, you don't want some mac and cheese? I don't want any of it. I don't want cheese and wine. I don't want mac and cheese. I don't want like to feel like that.
I mean, Tallene's the same exact way. I've never seen her since we started dating, like back 7 years ago, and now we're married. Like I never saw her one time actually be tempted to have something with gluten or dairy, because she's seen like the effects, the difference. Of course, like there's been times where like she gets a bite of ice cream or something, that's okay. But like to her, like,
yeah,
never seen you one time be like, I'm gonna just have it.
No, because it's actually addicting. And once you stop eating it, it stops being addicting because
Yeah.
dairy has casein in it that turns to casomorphine and passes through your blood brain barrier and like plays on your morphine like receptor sites. And it makes you feel like you're addicted to cheese, just
Yeah.
like morphine would.
Have you seen that article by LA Times? It says, I think it was something like cheese is like crack or something
I
like
actually
that.
did see that. I thought that was interesting. Yes, it does affect the same receptors. So dairy affects the same receptors as morphine in your brain, which is highly addictive. So kind of like sugar too, right? So what's crazy is that this is kind of off topic, but what's crazy is that they allow things like this in the United States in our food, right? Like, why is this allowed? My sister lives in Australia, and there are lots of things in America that we allow Americans to eat that they don't allow their animals to eat. Like, their animals can't even eat what we eat in Australia.
Yeah, because then you eat the animal and then
And
you
here,
essentially eat.
yeah, and here it's all the like majority of the bad stuff I feel like is targeted towards kids with the candies and the cereals. And I feel like as adults, of course, there's a lot of bad stuff too, but like it's really the kids that are being thrown all these like
The most
dyes and
vulnerable
stuff.
age group. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're
And
changing it now, I think.
yeah, they're making nice, like better candy.
Yeah, like no more red dye 40, and I hear other stuff is along the way, but
Yeah, and we wonder why our children have increasingly rates of autism and behavior issues and obesity and diabetes. I have seen teenagers that need liver transplants because they have such bad insulin resistance and diabetes, type 2 diabetes in teenagers, which is insane. And I actually saw one time whose mother was telling me how her daughter didn't eat that poorly while she was handing her daughter a Mountain Dew. And I was like, okay, we have some major educational barriers.
I mean, it's a systematic failure, I think, and it's all, in my opinion, done on purpose to a certain extent, right? To keep us unhealthy and that the, I mean, I don't know how deep you want to go in
How
this,
deep do we want to
but
go?
like it's keep us unhealthy and let the pharmaceutical companies just make us feel quote unquote healthier. It's all like just a band-aid approach as we just slowly get more and more unhealthy.
Hopefully it'll turn around.
I completely agree because healthcare is a big business, right? And when you're healthy, they don't make as much money, so it's unfortunate.
No one makes money from telling you to eat healthier or,
Or
you
take
know what I mean? Just
supplements.
take some supplements, eat healthy,
Yeah.
have a nice high protein breakfast. Like that's not as profitable as the other
Well, and here's my point to
suggestions.
this. It might not be as profitable for big pharma, but for our economy and our country and our people, it is astronomically more profitable because less people are missing work, less people are ill, less people are chronically depressed. You know what I mean? So the value is not looked at correctly. The value is looked at, for this one pharmaceutical company. But when you look at the lost wages and productivity and illness and time with your family and happiness, and it's really sad. So that's what I see, unfortunately. And it's just really sad. So okay. So, what about PCOS and carbs? So, to your point, you said a lot of doctors will tell people eat less, exercise more. And so then I have people with PCOS who, message me or come to me and say, so should I do keto? And so, what is your response to that?
Yeah, as a registered dietitian, I really just don't think that telling everyone to do keto just because they're insulin resistant is a good approach. I think that and I've read in a study that a moderate reduction in carbs and eating 40% of the food that you eat coming from carbs is enough to help improve your insulin resistance dramatically. And I'm saying 40% is like eating 150 grams of carbs a day. That's plenty. That's like a cup of rice with your lunch and like 2 slices of gluten-free bread in your dinner and some fruit with your breakfast. And like that's not that restrictive, as restrictive as keto, and it can help with your insulin resistance, just a slight reduction in carbs.
Yeah, and some people see benefits from doing keto in the immediate like aftermath. So for example, they go keto and then they do it for let's say 3 months and they see immediate results. And this is of course due to lowering of the carbs and improving their insulin sensitivity. However, it's when they get off of keto, a lot of times the weight can come back because they didn't target the root issue of the PCOS, weight gain, or whatever symptoms they were experiencing. So when they get off of the keto diet, the other things that were happening are not happening again, and then the weight gain comes back. So to Tyne's point, instead cutting down carbs, not drastically, to a certain point, hence like your carb tolerance level, like what carbs is your body good with, and just going with that and manage, and also focusing on other areas like protein versus just like cutting out carbs.
Yeah, I completely agree. And people who are just steadfast on like, I'm going to go keto with me, I try to talk them into carb cycling. I'm like, all right, well then let's do 150 grams on Monday and Friday, and let's do 100 grams on Tuesday and Thursday, and maybe you do 75 grams on Wednesday, and then we cycle back up. Like I try to talk them into something that's not so crazy, because I'm like, you need some carbs too, right? So like, as a personal trainer, this, Sirak, like you have to have energy to like function and to build muscle and so I think that I personally am not on the keto train. I try to not ever be on like a specific, box like that, because I think everyone's different. But I do think that I've read the same study. So reducing your carbohydrate intake by about 40% is very significantly, beneficial for people with PCOS, and 150 grams of carbs is plenty. And I tell people, have 30 per meal. If you have 30 per meal and, if you're having a snack, have 30. I mean, that's going to be sufficient, and you're not going to feel like you're, starving, or you're, neglecting yourself. You're never getting carbs, because I feel like the rebound of that is a problem, right?
Oh yeah, because
Yeah.
it's fuel, right? It's what fuels our body before a workout, after a workout, during the day when we're literally working. Our brain is fueled by carbs, so it's like you're just cutting off the fuel from your body functioning.
So with intermittent fasting, I recommend doing a 12-hour fast. So eat your dinner at like 7 p.m. and then your next meal is at 7 a.m. And I think a 12-hour fast is a great amount of time for your body to have a reduction in insulin levels, and a nice long period of time where insulin is not high. Because when insulin is high, if you're like snacking at night or snacking all day instead of having like a breakfast, lunch, dinner, like meal, your insulin levels are chronically high, and that blocks fat burning. Your body isn't able to shift into fat burning mode. It's in fat storage mode because your insulin levels are high. So that period of time between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. is very important to do a nice 12-hour fast. And then the period of time between your meals are also important to bring your insulin levels back down. So if your breakfast is at 8 and your lunch is at 12, you don't skip breakfast and just snack until lunch. Like that's going to affect your metabolism and your ability to burn fat on your body.
And some people may like opt to go to 14 or 16 hours. However, we don't like really recommend going up to that much unless you're used to it and you can kind of gauge how your body reacts. Because a lot of the studies done on intermittent fasting, they are very positive, but majority are done on men and on women who are not in their reproductive age. So we don't generally know how women who are in their reproductive age, how do they react to a 16-hour fast? How does that affect their reproductive hormones? Because it could hurt those hormones when their body perceives them as not getting enough food and fuel to their body. So yeah, to Tylene's point, 12 hours like where we generally start from, and keep it there unless you feel like the change.
Yeah, and to your point about the hormones, so I talk a lot about this. It depends on where you are in your cycle as a woman. It's very important to fast with your body, not against it. So in the beginning of your cycle, in your follicular phase, when your estrogen's high, so if day one is when you start your menstrual cycle, when you start bleeding, that's the beginning of your cycle until about halfway through your cycle, depending on how long your cycle is. With PCOS, not everyone has a 28-day cycle. So if you have a 56-day cycle, you have to know when you ovulate. But from when you start bleeding until when you ovulate, you're in your follicular phase, you have more estrogen. You are more able to fast. When you have high estrogen, it drives your insulin down. And so your body accepts fasting better. In the back half of your cycle, in your luteal phase, after you ovulate, your progesterone goes up and your cortisol, if you fast in the back half of your cycle, you drive your cortisol up. Your body is in that rest and recovery phase. At that point, your body's trying to accept an egg and become pregnant. And so your body changes. And so if you try to restrict yourself and overexercise and fast, you can actually drive your cortisol up, drive your insulin up, and it's counterproductive. And that's been shown multiple times. There's a great book, Fast Like a Girl, talks about it a lot. But so you can actually hurt yourself by overfasting. So I like that like 12, 14-hour window. I think the main thing is just, don't sit there and snack after dinner. That's where a lot of people mess up, is they're just like eating random things after dinner, not even paying attention to what they're eating because they're watching TV. And then they go to bed and their insulin spiking. And then they wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning because they have to pee and they've got a headache and they're having night sweats. And then they're trying to blame their hormones and their thyroid on their insulin spike. And then glucose drop in the middle of the night, And same thing with alcohol. A lot of people mess that up too. Like, alcohol counts, people, everyone listening. Sorry, your wine counts. So like, you shouldn't be drinking that right before you go to bed either. And so I like that. I think anything more than 14 hours, especially when you're trying to heal yourself, right? It's like, it's too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the problems with PCOS is the cravings, right? When you have insulin resistance. And so for anyone who's listening and trying to do a 12-hour fast and you feel like it's simply impossible because you're so hungry for sweets after dinner, you have to consider what you ate earlier in the day, because that's going to affect your ability to not snack at night. If you're skipping breakfast and having a light salad for lunch and then a huge dinner because you didn't have time to eat earlier in the day, you're going to crave everything that you were missing later. You know what I mean? You're going to want the cookies. You're going to want like more food. You're not going to be able to sleep unless you're having like a bowl of cereal and like almond butter and a banana, which is fine. Some like almond butter and a banana is fine if that's if you're like really hungry, but consider having 30 grams of protein for breakfast. Don't just skip your lunch and have a light lunch because you're trying to lose weight. Like, these meal times are really important to make sure that they're PCOS friendly.
Yeah. And to your point, that's so true. Like, I'm 100% guilty of this. There are days that I try to always eat breakfast before I leave my house, because once I get to my office, it's whatever. But there are days that I don't eat lunch. It's getting better. But there are days that I don't. And on the days that I don't eat lunch, my husband, like, I come home and he's like, oh God, I'm in the pantry. I want to eat everything. I'm starving. And it's true, because your body, I think people forget, like, our body does so much for us all day long, right? I use my brain all day long. It's very taxing work to think and to talk to people and to deduce things all day long. And so if you're not feeding your body correctly, then it's going to tell you, right? And and I'm also very passionate about walking every morning. I walk. I don't necessarily go to Orange Theory like I used to and like kill it, but I do walk for 30 minutes every morning. And so when you do things like this, like, your body requires energy. And so it's very important. Like, people need to realize that if you're not eating those regimented meals, and I know this, so when I do it to myself, I know, but you have to make sure that you're able to get enough nutrition in a day, or your body's going to tell you, and then your cravings are going to be insane. That's when I want to stand in my pantry and eat peanut butter out of a jar. I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need all the peanut butter. It's so stupid, but it's because I missed lunch and, I'm hungry. So, yeah. Okay. So intermittent fasting, we kind of talked about that. And then you kind of mentioned this, but I am on the same camp of like having a bigger breakfast, smaller dinner, if possible. I say, like, eat breakfast like a king, eat lunch like a queen, eat dinner like a pauper, so I think that's helpful for people too. And I think we mess that up in America, right? They do it right in Europe. We don't do it right here. I think that that's helpful if people can get used to that, right?
Yeah. Well, I think because I found this study that was on women who ate a bigger breakfast and a lighter dinner, and it found that their testosterone levels and their insulin levels went down by 50% the next day. And that's like a huge, huge difference.
Wow.
Like, once I read that, I was like, that's what we're doing. Like, that sounds great. You wake up, you're more insulin sensitive, your body's ready to eat and metabolize because you had this 12-hour fast. And it's time to like eat and to have things that are high protein and healthy fats, and that will make you stay full until it's lunchtime around 12 or 1 o'clock. And then, like you said, having a light dinner afterwards.
So what do you guys typically eat for breakfast?
I mean, it's usually a combination of things. Either Tallene has meal prepped like over the weekend, so we have this like chia seed pudding that has chia seeds, protein, a bunch of different. To be honest,
You don't
a bunch of different ingredients. I just eat it
It's
up.
like magic.
I don't even
It's
ask.
just magic. He just eats it. It's
Or
just
Tali
there.
will,
Yeah,
yeah, or
it
like
appears.
Tali, like today, Tali made high protein pancakes. I mean, she made it the other day, but we have like a bunch left over. So again, high protein pancakes. I think the goal essentially for us and for Tali, of course, with PCOS, not to speak for you, but just shooting for a goal of 30 grams of protein, especially for breakfast, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't like to spend a lot of time making breakfast. Like just because it's 30 grams doesn't mean you have to sit there and like flip pancakes. Like I made the pancakes Sunday, froze them, and now I can just microwave it and, crack an egg on top, have some almond butter, and I know it's going to add up to 30 grams because it was high protein
Yeah.
pancakes.
Or like smoothies, or like another go-to easy one that we make a lot of time, a lot of mornings.
Yeah.
Eggs, yeah. Things like
Smoothies
that.
are easy. You put your protein powder in. Chia seed pudding is always delicious. I make it like I can go on and on about chia seed pudding. I have these great flavor combinations. I post about it in our app.
Perfect. So I kind of want to switch and ask you, Sirak, about exercise. So, a lot of people ask, like, when I have PCOS, can I fill in the blank? Like, what kind of exercise should I do? Is it okay if I do Orange Theory? Should I be doing the stair climber until I feel like I'm going to fall off of it? Like, what should you be doing to help manage your PCOS when it comes to exercise?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I want to really mention to everybody too is the exercise you should be doing is something you should be enjoying, so that it makes you want to go back to the gym or your home gym, anything, right? So like for example, a lot of people love the stairmaster, so they'll do the stairmaster for like an hour because it really works the glutes and the legs, and like a lot of people's goals. So like if that's what you like and it gives you results and you're happy with it, go for it and do it. But just one thing I want to drive across though is your workout plan, your exercise plan should really focus on the root issues that we talked about earlier. So, for example, insulin resistance, adrenal fatigue. We highly recommend incorporating strength training done at a low intensity, because studies show that strength training, just one session of strength training, can improve your metabolism for the next 3 days. So, literally, if you work out today, you do a strength training session, and tomorrow you're just sitting at your desk working or at school, your metabolism is actually higher because of that workout you had the day before. So essentially your body's now more efficient at processing insulin, it's better at burning calories and burning fat if that is your goal. So highly recommend doing strength training at a low intensity. So what a lot of women with PCOS do is, again, this is because like they go to the doctor's office or they listen to like a Google search that tells them just eat less and work out as hard as possible. Focus on the calories out, calories burned, and the calories in. So what they do is they'll go and they'll run for hours, or they'll do spin classes, or Orange Theory. In your situation, you did it like 7 times a week, right? And this is like bombarding their body with constant stress, spiking their cortisol levels, and that's then exacerbating other PCOS symptoms because they're in this high stress state. So we just highly recommend to first lower down the intensity. So doing strength training where you're taking adequate breaks. It's kind of like taking 1 minute rest. It's almost like bodybuilding, but not like bodybuilding, right? It's like bodybuilding, like doing like sets, taking a break, doing your next set, taking a break, listening to your body, controlling your breath, making sure your heart rate's not going crazy, versus like HIIT workouts where you might be jumping from one workout to the next, to the next, to the next. You're sweating, you're out of breath, and then you're like, am I even doing this right? Is my form correct? And then like a week or two goes by and then you don't see any results and you're just left feeling like you failed. When in fact, it's just sometimes you might be working against your body without knowing it. So hopefully that answered it. Essentially, I would just recommend everyone to start on a low intensity strength training regimen, doing that 2 to 3 times a week, and then incorporating walks several times throughout your day. So like shoot for 5,000 steps a day to get yourself started. And it doesn't mean you have to do all your steps at once. So maybe doing it after breakfast, after lunch, before or after dinner. And then try to get to 5,000 steps. And then from there, try to maybe get to 10,000 steps as your next, goal. And combining those two with walking and strength training, we feel may feel simple for some, but it's a really, really powerful workout regimen.
Yeah, I completely agree. I like to so I tell people walk in the morning. Like when you first wake up in the morning, one of the best things I think you can do, drink some room temperature water with lemon. I don't know if you guys believe in chakra, but it clears your throat chakra and kind of helps with like digestion. And so that's the first thing I do. I leave like a glass of water on my counter before I go to bed, so I know it's room temperature. And then as soon as I wake up, I just put my lemon in there, drink my water, and I go for a walk outside. And it's
If it's cold, is it bad? Because I usually have like ice cold water
so
next to
to
me.
clear your throat chakra, if you're really into chakra and like Ayurveda medicine, Indian medicine, in order to get digestion moving when you first wake up, it's supposed to be room temperature. But so that's why I do that. I have all sorts of Ayurveda patients, and I know a provider, and they've told me why it's supposed to be room temperature. I can't remember, but your body accepts it better if it's room temperature. So I do that, and then I walk. And to your point, like when I got off the Orange Theory train, it was hard for me, but I found that like if I go for a walk in the morning, anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes, I usually do 30 minutes now, but I started at 10, just like very calming, you just like start your day in this great calming presence. And although it's like sleeting ice in Oklahoma right now, if you can go outside, you're just like in this happier headspace when you just like see nature and like, so I encourage people like go for a 10-minute walk in the morning. And then if you want to do some strength training, that's usually what I do, or I may do it later in the day. But then I like to walk for 10 minutes after lunch and then 10 minutes after dinner, and take your family with you. Like I make my husband go. I'm like, we're going for a walk. I make my dog go. My dog's lost 3 pounds. My dog has to go for a walk.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How cute.
It's usually the other way around. Like usually the dog makes
Well,
you
yeah,
go,
no,
right?
I have a
So
pug. So pugs are very lazy dogs. And she was very overweight because my husband likes to feed her all the things. But we put her on a diet recently, which means I make her food. So now she doesn't eat dog food because I listen to all the episodes about all the crap that's in dog food. So my dog's not allowed to eat dog food anymore. So I make her food on Sunday when I meal prep for us. She gets meal prepped food. But yeah, I mean, take your dog, take your significant other, take somebody with you, or just go by yourself. But I think, what I see in 30-year-old women, 30-plus-year-old women is chronic over exercising. And that's because we were all a product of the 80s. And it was like run, 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 sweat, run, instead of like do something to build muscle and strength train. And that's one of the things that I wish I would have changed a lot in my 20s, was to be more focused on building muscle instead of just like running on a treadmill forever, because it is so beneficial. To your point, like if you strength train, even if it's for 20 minutes, that's what I think people say to me all the time, I don't have an hour in the morning to strength train. I'm like, neither do I. You can strength train in 20 to 25 minutes and like put in some work. The people on social media that tell you have to exercise and strength train for an hour are bodybuilders, with most of them have like body dysmorphia anyways, and you don't want to get any medical advice from them, I promise. So you want to talk about some serious body dysmorphia issues, go on social media and, follow all these people that look like they're bodybuilders.
oh yeah, and not to mention how many of them are on steroids, or even like a lot of women personal trainers on social media. You don't realize like they're actually doing very small amounts of steroids or testosterone to make themselves look so lean and stuff. So yeah, 100%.
Luckily, us women with PCOS already have a genetic advantage of having high testosterone. So if we can just harness it and let it and get it to not be so high,
Yeah.
where it's like a genetic advantage if it's slightly high.
Yeah. And to
That'd
that
be good.
to that effect too, like a lot of times, we're focused on immediate results, and what do we feel like gives us the immediate results, which is running for hours or feeling exhausted after a workout. You're like drenched from all the sweat. But obviously, for a lot of people, because of hormonal conditions and other scenarios, like you don't end up losing weight. But when you do like these strength training workouts, the morning walks, it's more about the compounding effect, right? Like what we talked about, your metabolism and your body's more insulin sensitive for 3 days after a workout. So imagine you're doing that now 3 times a week, and that's like compounding over weeks and months. And now the weight's like falling off, and you're no longer retaining weight when you eat. So it's really about the long-term results, like the investment you're making, that's going to flourish. Just like a 401k, right? Your 401k compounds year after year after year. And then when you're 75 or sorry 65, you retire and you're like, boom. So it's the same thing. Like you work out now for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And as you get older, you're going to feel better and better.
I completely agree. And so the last question I want to ask you, well, second to last question, tell us like, what does an ideal day of PCOS management look like? Like what are like 10 healthy habits, or what are something that, walk people through, like if I have PCOS from when I wake up in the morning till when I go to bed, what does an ideal day look like for me? Just simple, actionable things.
An ideal day. And I try to do this. Obviously, no one's perfect, but I try this. I wake up, it's like 6:15, and I get ready and I go and I lift weights starting at 7 o'clock until 8 o'clock. 15 minutes of that is stretching. So it's like 45 minutes of weightlifting. Then I come home and I walk on my treadmill. I do something called 12-3-30. It's a 12% incline, 3 miles per hour, 30 minutes. My husband told me to do this, and it has been life-changing.
But I feel like your routine now is like an experienced person's routine too.
Yeah.
So this is like this for anyone who's like new to PCOS. I wouldn't say like do all this to get started,
No.
right? Yeah.
I'm
just
painting the picture. You do the best you can. It took me years to get used to this. I was not a morning workout person. Like it just took time. So I lifted weights. I'm walking. Now it's 8:30-ish. It's like 8:45 actually, by the time I like drive and stuff. And then I make breakfast around 9 o'clock. It's a high protein breakfast. So if it isn't a chia seed pudding that I've already meal prepped, then it's probably a smoothie. And there's 30 or 35 grams of protein in it. And so that's my breakfast. Then I'll take my supplements, and I typically take the bundle that we have, which is it's coenzyme Q10, it's curcumin, omega-3, and a multivitamin.
Yeah.
And I've added glutathione to that, as well as berberine. What were you going to say?
Inositol maybe?
Oh, inositol. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, yes. All right, people, everyone who's listening. Inositol is the most researched supplement for women with PCOS. So if you have insulin resistance, taking 4,000 milligrams of inositol at a 40-to-1 ratio is ideal. So you see me on Instagram, I'm always taking Ovasitol. That's the one that I use. It's NSF certified, very important, which means it's third-party tested. So I've had my breakfast, I've had my supplements. I'll pour myself a cup of spearmint tea, which helps reduce testosterone levels. And then
That's
I'm
like
ready
your
to
replacement
sit
for
down.
coffee. That's like your coffee replacement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't drink coffee. I try to avoid alcohol, but every once in a while, a glass of wine. So anyways, that's my breakfast. Now I sit down to work, la-di-da, and then lunch is around 1 o'clock. I'll have, again, something that's very protein-centric, but of course, I'm not skipping out on the carbs. Like I said earlier, eating around 100 grams of carbs works for me. Everyone's different. And then...
Do I walk after lunch?
Yeah, a little walk after lunch, and then work, and fold some laundry at 6 o'clock, cook dinner, blah, 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 and dinner's at like 7. And I try to eat less carbs at night. I'm not saying no carbs, but like the majority was at lunch or during breakfast. I forgot to mention I do like to have a snack around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, which is right now. I'm hungry. And that'll consist of like nut butter and a banana or something that maybe I baked. I like to make low carb, high protein snacks. The other day it was like a brownie made with almond flour. I made a banana bread with coconut flour. It's gluten-free, dairy-free, no sugar in it. The banana was the sweetness. Something like that, for a snack. And then dinner and yeah. I feel like I could add more details.
But also like your nighttime routine. Do you want to kind of touch on that?
Yeah, I try to have a nighttime routine. This is actually the hardest part for me. I've nailed the morning, that I do all of those things regularly, but the nighttime routine of like, don't stare at your phone at night. Make sure you have blue light blocking glasses on if you're going to look at screens. Try to read a book before bed. And walk during the sunset so that those sun rays help increase your melatonin levels. And of course, fast for 12 hours after your dinner.
Yeah, I think you do a good job. I mean, we moved into a new place.
Screens that get
me. Like we moved into a new place 6 months ago, and I enacted a law that basically says after 8 p.m. no phones in the bedroom. So we basically leave the phones in the bathroom until the morning. And we have like a little battery alarm so that like the alarm goes off. Like we have an alarm system just in case. But essentially for 2 reasons. One, of course, like the blue light, you don't want to be looking at your phone before you go to sleep. Also, 2, you don't want that radiation, the radio signals emitted from the phone next to your head all night. It's already next to us all day as it is. So for those 2 reasons, bedrooms only. Bathroom only.
I like that. Okay, perfect. So that sounds like a wonderful routine. So your experience with PCOS, like when were you diagnosed with PCOS? How did you reverse it? Probably by the routine you just told us, right? Did you meet your husband after this diagnosis? Before? Was he beneficial in helping? Like, tell us about that just briefly.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed when I was 18. I had a ruptured ovarian cyst and really bad symptoms, the facial hair, the acne, really bad cystic acne, weight gain, the whole 9 yards. And, the way I reversed it, it took a long time to learn all of these little things like eating a high protein breakfast, stop doing the HIIT workouts that are like, kickboxing every single day. Like it took a long time to uncover this. Back then, there was no Instagram, nobody was talking about it. And I went to naturopathic doctors who really helped me figure that part out. Then I met my husband, Sirak, and we started working out together. And I was really into like kickboxing and running and all those intense workouts. Chaotic workouts, I like to call it. And then he taught me how to lift weights, which I was really intimidated by because it's all like men in the weightlifting section. Like I'm just not, I never lifted weights. And he taught me how to do it, and it was like a meditation.
The
It was
first
like
time,
not
yeah, the
crazy.
first time we did it, I remember it was like a shoulder press. I'm like, all right, you're gonna do your first set. She does her first set, and then it's my turn, and I'm like, okay, now you can rest. And she's like, wait, what do I do though? Should I like run around? Should I do jumping jacks? Like, should I do a jump rope? I'm like, no. You rest 60 seconds. Trust me, you're gonna want to rest because this workout's gonna be, not intense, but it's gonna, take a lot. So yeah, and then that was like when you first learned
Yeah.
about actually resting.
Yeah, and then after the workout, it was like I meditated, but I was sore at the same time, but I wasn't exhausted. And it was this whole new feeling that I didn't even know
Yeah.
could possibly happen. So over time, I've like learned things. I became a registered dietitian, which is wonderful in learning metabolism, but they don't teach you about PCOS in school. It's just the same thing as doctors. Like you have like one slide on a PowerPoint for this condition that affects 1 in 5 women. And it's the most common endocrine disorder that can be healed through diet and lifestyle changes. But there's literally one slide on a PowerPoint. And so I had to learn it on my own, basically. And I like to we have condensed all that information into our app, into our resources on Instagram, on YouTube and everything, our podcast, because it's hard. I just told you a daily routine, and it sounds normal,
Yeah.
but it's not. Like you have to learn like why and try it one step at a time and like track it. And it's not easy at first, and it gets easier once you get used to it and feel good.
No, I think that sounds like you did exactly what you were supposed to do. But that's funny. I see that. That was kind of me whenever I started lifting weights too. Like you do a set and then you're like, oh, should I sprint down and back? I'm just seeing it in my head. And you're like, no. So no more hectic. Do you do your walking every day? Do you do it 7 days a week? Do you take a day off? Do you lift weights every day?
I lift weights 4 times a week, and then so far I've been doing the 12 through 30 4 times a week. I'm gonna eventually do it every day, but I haven't
Okay. So then
gotten
on the
there.
days that you don't lift or walk, kind of your off days, do you do any sort of yoga or anything like that?
No, I have to like get into yoga. I have scoliosis, so that would be great for my posture. But again, like for me, doing the strength training at 7 a.m. 4 times a week and doing 12 through 30 after that is like good and I feel good, and so there's always more you could do.
You already
But
walk on your off days though. Like you walk still,
yeah, I'll go on a walk, and right now it's hard. Our puppy doesn't have all of her vaccines, so we can't take her on a walk, or else I'd be walking all weekend, for an hour at least every day. But
Yeah.
so I think like certain circumstances are actually like deterring me from going on that walk. I don't want to leave the puppy at home and walk, or we have plans or something. So the best way for me to squeeze it in is when I'm already in my workout clothes. I came back from the gym, get on the treadmill in the garage before getting into the house and get it out of the way.
Okay. Well, I think that was all awesome information about PCOS. I think that's like the most information you can provide someone about PCOS in about an hour. So I hope that anyone that's listening to this that had questions, I mean, I think that we covered a lot of them. And if not, like I said, we're going to redirect our listeners to your podcast because you do a wonderful job covering all the things. Before we go, though, I want to ask you guys 3 questions that I always ask all of our guests. And so I want you both to answer too. You guys can take turns, whatever. But the first question, and don't overthink it, just whatever comes to your mind. What is one food that's most beneficial and why?
I know.
Go.
Chia seeds.
Why?
Because they are jam-packed with nutrients. They have protein and fiber. They have more antioxidants than blueberries. They have more calcium than milk. They are so nutrient dense. I suggest every woman with PCOS to have at least 2 tablespoons a day.
I go with that response. I think that's perfect.
Yeah. And then the next thing I'd say is meat. I really like protein, like organ meat, things that are really nutrient dense, but I'm starting with chia seeds.
What is one thing that anyone can do that improves their health that's completely free?
I want to say strength training or just going on a walk. Like just a morning walk is gonna help lower your cortisol levels just from your eyes seeing the morning sun. Same thing when you're walking in the evening. Just your eyes seeing the nighttime sky as you're walking, as the sun's setting. That's gonna help lower cortisol, increase melatonin. So I would just say most cheapest thing that everyone can do that will really make you feel better and help you on your goals is going on a walk.
Okay, perfect. A lot of people say walk. And then the last.
Oh, now we're boring. Okay, I don't want to have a boring
I
response.
think just because it's so true. I think it's one of those things that people just don't give enough credit to, like walking in the morning is just so beneficial for so many things. And people think, oh, well, that's not really doing anything because I'm not on a treadmill running really hard. I'm not sweating. But it's doing so many things for you mentally and physically. And so, yeah, I think walking is amazing. The last question is, and you both have to answer this. What is one thing that you wish you would have known about your health 15 years ago that you would have done differently?
I wish I knew about insulin resistance. That's kind of broad. So I guess I wish I knew about going gluten and dairy free. It took me a while to like learn it, do it, apply it, and see the difference because I was so resistant and it was so different than what anyone was telling me. But I wish I knew that sooner because it really helped with inflammation and insulin resistance. That specifically made a very big difference in my PCOS journey.
And I would say for me, just learning about like sugar and like I want to say just I would say diet, but I want to say sugar specifically because up until I was like 19 or 20, I really wasn't aware of like what was in our foods or like what kind of impact like drinking a Coca-Cola does, things like that. And then around 19 years old, I started to listen to more like health conscious like podcasts like yours, and from there it really blew my mind about the things that were in our food, the things that we're eating. So like from like around that age, I stopped drinking Coke, stopped eating certain unhealthier foods, and like really developed a much healthier diet and lifestyle. So I would just say not knowing more about sugar, just to be more specific.
So I forgot to ask this question too. Sirak, do you eat gluten and dairy free as well? Or
I have definitely changed my habits a lot. I will not say though that I am 100% like Tallene is. Like she still will make me like a sandwich if there's no gluten-free bread from like bread with like wheat and stuff. But like I will say I've definitely reduced it significantly, and I'm like even more motivated like this year to completely cut it out. It's just
I think
I
the
don't know.
only time you eat
It's a
dairy,
sandwich, really.
the dairy is in like the cheese. I make him a panini with gluten-free bread and and then like sometimes a snack has gluten in it, but our dinner never has gluten in it or dairy and
Yeah.
breakfast and stuff. So generally he's gluten and dairy free, but not 100%. Whereas if I have like a slice of cheese, I'm going to have acne. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's a serious situation. For him, it's not obviously
yeah,
as
that's similar to my
serious.
husband and I. He has done so much better. I'm very proud of him, but he still will, if we go out or whatever, he'll eat cheese. It just doesn't bother him. It's so not fair. It's not fair. But
I do have like right now I'm really focused on like the similar stuff where like I'm kind of looking at my gut health and my thyroid because both of those have been kind of like I'm seeing some red flags and I really want to get down to the bottom of those two. So that's been like my focus right now for sure. So maybe like reducing gluten could help with the thyroid as well.
100%. Would you eat Roundup?
No.
Then you need to stop eating gluten.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, honestly, the only times I eat it is just a sandwich. That's really it. Like, I can't even think about any other time. Because, like, Tallene doesn't make, like, carbs with gluten in it. Like, she doesn't make, like, pasta or things
Yeah.
like that. It's usually rice or sweet potatoes or potato, like, things that are generally naturally gluten-free.
So you just need to get some gluten-free bread. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
That's
have
tricky,
so
too.
much. No, Kenyan Bakehouse sent us a bunch.
Well,
Oh,
I
okay,
have
okay.
a great recipe on my website too that you could go to if you're interested, and you can get a bread maker. But I make my husband gluten-free bread now on Sundays, and you just dump everything in this bread maker. It's so easy. It takes like 5 minutes to dump it in there, and then in 2 hours you have this loaf of bread that's amazing. It's gluten-free, and we put it in the fridge, and I just make it every Sunday. So now he doesn't eat.
Why don't we
Because I gave the bread machine to your mother.
bring my mother into this? How dare you?
No,
She's
but
a nice lady.
I can ask for
Or
it
just
back, or I
buy
can
her
ask for
buy
cake,
another,
eh?
you know. But okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
guys so much for coming on our podcast and helping to educate people more about PCOS. It's such an underserved topic. Like you mentioned, at least 1 in 10 women struggle with this in the United States. And the sad thing is a lot of people don't even know that they have it, but there needs to be better education. And so I appreciate what you guys do. I love your work. Please keep doing it. If you're listening to this and you struggle with PCOS, or anyone you know struggles with PCOS, they've had infertility issues or issues with weight gain, please share this episode with them, because that's why we do this, is for educational purposes. And then make sure that you join us next week on the next episode of Hormones, Metabolism, and You. Thanks, guys. So that episode on PCOS was so inspiring and so full of just wonderful information. I hope that if you are somebody who is struggling with PCOS, you feel better, you feel better informed, you feel better equipped, you feel like you have nuggets or information that you can take from this podcast and start changing small things in your life so that you can start treating your PCOS and curing your PCOS. And now you have questions that you can ask your provider. Or if you are somebody struggling with PCOS and you need a provider to help you figure out, is your insulin high? Is your thyroid working? Is your adrenal stressed? Modern Endocrine would be happy to help you with that as well. We do have a license in 21 states. They are all listed on our website. We do virtual visits. If we don't have a license in your state, you can come to Oklahoma and see us once, and then we can treat you from afar virtually. And we'd be honored to be on that journey with you. We really, really look at people as a whole, and that's what's needed with PCOS. I hope that you can tell from this interview that I did. There are lots of moving pieces, but having a supportive, practitioner, a supportive provider will get you a long way, and then just continuing to educate yourself. So I hope that you found this very educational. If so, please leave us a review and let us know that you appreciate this and that you want us to continue doing it. Reach out to me on social and let me know who else you want me to interview, what you want to learn about. We will link all of their stuff in the show notes as well. Again, I love their podcast. I think it's very beneficial. A Cyster and Her Mister. We'll also link information to their app as well if you're somebody who wants to join their community so that they can continue to help cure and heal your PCOS as well. And don't forget to not only share and like this, but also follow us next week for our next episode of Hormones, Metabolism, and You. Have a good week. The information presented, including any materials discussed, referenced, or linked within this podcast, are for general educational purposes only, not the practice of medicine. No doctor-patient relationship is formed from you listening to this podcast or utilizing any of the information provided. I am a doctor, but I am not talking to you as your doctor. The information provided is not intended to diagnose or treat health problems or take the place of the professional medical care provided by your doctor. If you are experiencing any health problems, including problems you believe have been touched upon in any respect within this podcast, you should consult your doctor about the problems without delay. You may ask your doctor whether he or she believes the information I have provided would be helpful to you, but you should still consult your doctor immediately and follow his or her medical advice as your treating physician. I'm just here to provide you basic knowledge about the issues we discuss so you are more aware of them and can better discuss them with your doctor. That's why we call it Back to the Basics. Join me on the next episode as we continue our journey.